Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Rupeya Chandler, and I am so honored to be joined by Dr. Cornelia Walther. It can feel jarring to witness the breakneck pace of AI innovation happening alongside some of the most devastating humanitarian crises of our time. For the past few years, these conversations, one about technological progress and the other about human suffering, have too often taken place in separate echo chambers. But there are people doing the powerful work, the nuanced work of bridging those worlds. People asking, what if innovation and empathy, productivity and compassion aren't mutually exclusive, but actually most powerful when they exist together? One of those people is Dr. Cornelia C. Walther. Dr. Walther has spent over 2 decades leading humanitarian efforts within the United Nations and now continues her work as a fellow at the University of Pennsylvania Wharton School. She's the founder of ProSocial AI, has developed a transdisciplinary framework to analyze and address the multidimensional nature of individual transformation and collective change. Her current focus is on a global initiative that seeks to equip humans with pro-social AI and hybrid intelligence. So we will be digging deeper into those terms today as a ways toward harnessing AI that brings out the best in and for people and planet. Her research and writing make a compelling case for why centering empathy and human dignity in the AI conversation isn't just morally right, it's strategically and economically vital. I'm thrilled she's here with us today to share more about that vision and the important work she's doing at the intersection of AI, public policy, and global well-being. Dr. Walther, thank you so much for being here. I'd like to start by asking, can you share your journey in your own words? What specifically has led you to the work that you're doing today, and what's the driving force behind building pro-social AI?
Thank you so much for the opportunity. I have been working with UNICEF for 20 years in humanitarian operations around the world, and then left the UN, wrote various books about social change via individual transformation, and started to become ever more intrigued by the potential of technology for positive social change at scale. Starting in 2021, wrote a book about that before ChatGPT became the name of every game. And I have been fascinated by this double-sided face of technology in general and generative AI in particular. Ultimately, whatever good can come out of it is not so much the question of the tool, but about those who design, deliver, and deploy that tool. And that's what led me to ProSocial AI systems that are tailored, trained, tested, and targeted to bring out the best in and for people and planet. And this very strong belief that AI can be a force for social good, but it's not going to happen by itself.
You talk about how you've been talking about this before ChatGPT really hit the scene back in 2021. And since that time, you've written, as you said, you've written books about this. You have written 5 books, at least to my knowledge. You're publishing articles at a breakneck pace. And your writing is what I like to call thoughtful leadership. It's not just it's cutting through what I feel like is a buzz, where because you're talking about AI that centers compassion, people, planet, it really cuts through. It's a more fresh and uniquely differentiated take. What inspires or informs this thoughtful leadership, and what kind of sources, where are you looking to gain inspiration for this today? And how are you staying on top of the high velocity of developments day to day?
I think my answer to that will be very incomplete because I'm very non-strategic in terms of how I stay informed. Also because, as you said before, it is a blur. So being ever confident in saying on top, I think it's nearly impossible. Also because of the multiplicity of sources and new events that are happening every moment. Like whilst we're talking, there can be 3 new tools that enter the market. We might learn about it, we may not. So I guess in that sense, it becomes important to take a step back, put things into perspective, and really remain very acutely aware of why are we using it? What is the bigger landscape that we're part of, but also what are the outcomes that we want to achieve in the best case scenario? No matter how sophisticated our tools become, they will not be better than the humans that design and use them. So the old saying, garbage in, garbage out, still stands true. We can shift that towards values in, values out, but that involves choices. To make those choices, it's important to combine constant reading and staying abreast of what news is going on. And at the same time, not just reading technology, but also to read some of the old wisdom practices. I guess what I find most helpful in the current hype around AI is maybe what Buddha or the old wisdom thinkers of ancient times have said long before ChatGPT entered the game.
The hot take here is to stay really on top of things is to go back and read maybe the more vintage, if we want to call it that, texts. Yeah. And there's this interesting like trend that I don't know if it's spoken about so much, but I've seen it alluded to where people are turning to spirituality a lot in this age. Perhaps you've already written about it. As machines rise in their intelligence, we're really finding a lot of wisdom, like you said, in those historical thinkers, the original thought leaders. The piece that really resonated with me, and I'm so grateful that the algorithm led me to it because I was able to get introduced to the rest of your amazing work, was your piece on it's called How AI Could Help with Humanitarian Crises like the one in Gaza. I think the reason that stood out was for two reasons. I haven't really seen people talk about it in the tech space, or maybe I'm just not in the right spaces. And I also really felt that juxtaposition where it's like advancing technology and the literally the worst humanitarian crisis in at least my lifetime. What really prompted you to put that out there? And how was the response? Was there a response that surprised you or didn't surprise you?
Thank you for picking that up. I think this aspect that the world is evolving at disparate speeds has been puzzling me for the past 3 decades. And the fact that this is coming now very much into a sharpened focus with the AI speed and the money that goes into it and the attention paid to it on the one hand, and then humanitarian crises that happen in plain sight and nobody is doing anything about it, or what is being done about it is not enough, and where we're witnessing unbelievable suffering and it's happening, and we have the means, we have the resources, and still it continues. It's a paradox I can't come to grips with. And so I guess that was for me the trigger of the article. And maybe to bring this to something I wrote about earlier, the ABCD of AI challenges relates to agency decay, which I'm sure we'll talk more about, the bond erosion, the dissolution of interpersonal relationships, the climate conundrum, and the environmental impact of AI, and the D of divided society. Gaza is a very stark reminder of that. There are millions that enjoy technology and billions who do not even have electricity, clean water, and safety. It's very important that we harness our technological treasure chest to actually address the biggest problems humanity is grappling with today.
Technological treasure chest. I like that. I was in Silicon Valley for several years, and I would go to these tech conferences at the top of this whole generative AI hype. in 2023, I asked a question to an executive at a conference. What about the climate impact of this? Isn't there high energy consumption for training these models? I said, that's not a sexy question. And that sentiment has been told to me in various points in my career where you can't be pro-environment and pro-economic prosperity. How do you make a strong case to address that very common pushback? What is the economic case for compassionate AI?
Well, ultimately, I would argue that compassion pays off in any domain, including in AI, not only in AI. But there are two compelling economic cases. We all live on the same planet. And in an interconnected hyper reality, planetary boundaries or cross-country separations, they become second choice. They become irrelevant. And if one place suffers, then the others ultimately will experience the ripple effects. So at some point, we all pay the consequences when some countries or individuals invest full speed in something that hampers the rest. So really investing in a more compassionate angle to AI or any other technology is a win-win for the humans we are, the communities we belong to, the countries we're part of, and the planet that we depend on. No matter how much we think that we're safe on our little island, alone, that island will sink very fast.
Is there a case study, since these folks love case studies so much, is there a case study that we can point to? I think of one, like there was a pilot in Nigeria where a school had an AI-powered, assistant kind of educated learning experience with human tutors as well, and the results were really phenomenal. Do we have other kind of cases like that you point to say, like, look, there is this case for AI helping us close those gaps and boost our economic prosperity to the naysayers?
I think there are two separate issues that you are currently combining. One is the benefit of AI for individuals.
Mm-hmm.
For example, what you just gave with the schools, not necessarily an economic case in point, but that has certainly helped children and teachers to learn better. There are various cases, for example, in therapeutic circumstances where thousands of people experience now personal, tailored, on their phone guidance, counseling that is always available and that many feel gives them a psychological support that they either could not afford financially or where simply the professionals that could have provided it would not have been available. So that is the social dimension that, yes, certain people would certainly be able to make an economic case for, but that I would classify more as what are the social payoffs of AI. But if we think about it from a purely economic standpoint, AI deployed with a pro-social angle, not just with the ambition of efficiency and effectiveness, can take education to scale, bring children into the school, or at least in the education realm, that would have previously been excluded from it. And there are still millions of children in that situation who either do not have access to school and education at all, or who have very limited low quality education. Now, you put into that equation always available, highly knowledgeable AI teachers and tutors, it is a big economic win for the human being, but also for the economy that they are part of.
So scaling high quality, personalized AI for care, for education, and the rippling effects. If we dig a little bit more into what makes for compassionate AI, maybe in the development, but also in the collaboration with and use of AI, there's a few terms that I come across in your writing quite a bit that I find really interesting, unique, and I'd love to ask you if you could share more about them. So the first is hybrid intelligence as a way to collaborate with AI, aspirational algorithms, and double literacy. Do you mind sharing with our ammi.ai community what are those terms and why it's important for us to pursue these modes in our AI literacy and AI fluency journeys?
Absolutely. So hybrid intelligence refers to the complementarity of NI and AI, natural intelligence and artificial intelligence. Natural intelligence is far more complex, nuanced, and multidimensional than the artificial counterpart, I would argue. I mentioned before the Posé paradigm that I developed in my first books, which relates to human existence as a composition of four dimensions: aspirations, emotions, thoughts, and sensations at the individual level, and individuals as part of communities, countries, and the planet at the collective level. These 4x4 dimensions are from what natural intelligence arises. And that understanding also makes it very clear that there is a solid demarcation to what AI is, which is pattern prediction. In that sense, hybrid intelligence requires double literacy. So on the one hand, human literacy, a solid understanding of our own self and the society that we are part of, and the interplay between us and the planet. And on the other hand, algorithmic literacy. In that sense, not just digital literacy, but beyond prompting what's the tool and how does it work, toward why does it work that way? What are the limitations? And that double literacy then equips us to really interact with AI, but also design and deploy the kind of pro-social AI systems that are beneficial, both to ourselves and the institutions that we're part of. Those pro-social AI systems will be powered by aspirational algorithms. Aspirational algorithms are those that reflect the aspiration to bring out the best in and for people and planet.
And you make a point also that this is our competitive edge, right? If we lean into our humanity, if we understand the machine and we understand our human strengths and limitations and the machine's human strengths and limitations, we know for a particular task or use case, we know when to lean more machine, we know when to lean more human, and then at the individual level and then at the collective level, that makes your differentiated value as well. I really appreciate that emphasis on humanness and the value of humanness in your work. I feel that increasingly, if we keep referring back to the buzz, we are losing that, where the hype is around the machine and not the humans that built it and that it's built for. So bringing this to the ideal state, if your vision for pro-social AI comes to life, what does that look like at the individual level? What is AI's role? And at the macro level, what is AI's role?
I think something that holds true for both levels is that pro-social AI can come to full thrive if a very important condition is fulfilled beforehand, which is that the society or the individual catches up to something that is currently falling through the cracks of the education system, which is that human literacy piece. Critical thinking, value-based orientation and really taking 2 steps back and thinking, why does it matter? And what is my imprint on the world? That lesson that is very rarely transmitted in schools has actually now been caught up on. Because if we have that foundation, then ProSocial AI flows naturally, because it becomes obvious that AI systems that are just configured for the sake of efficiency and effectiveness, at the end of the day, will not get us where we want to be. Hence, the subtitle of the book that is coming out in the fall is The Technology We Need for the World We Want. But that somehow has, in the footnotes, if you like, well, what are the humans that we need for the technology we need? We can't really expect the technology to be better than the human.
Very tactically speaking, I don't want to skip ahead to the third question, but in terms of what we can advocate for, because you're talking about education, that is a conversation that parents hopefully have some influence and can try to shape. Very tactically speaking, what would we want to see in a curriculum that helps humans increase their human literacy? Is it more socialization time? What does that look like?
I would argue it's a combination of different features, which certainly will depend very much on the local context in which it is playing out. Because if double literacy is integrated in schools in Germany, it will not look the same as if it is taught in schools in Kuala Lumpur or in Hungary. But it requires a very careful selection of local culture, of local customs, traditions, and the ancient wisdom that we spoke about before, and which every country has something that is very special, something very local. But then in addition, there are certain universal traditions and practices and established wisdoms that have been around for a long time. So I would argue this should be part of the package, then also an understanding of our multidimensional being. Plus, emotional intelligence has been around since the 70s, but I think the schools that teach it are very far and few. Interpersonal communication. I have not seen any primary school where this is really put on the forefront. So yes, it is important to put attention on digital literacy, but it's not enough. It's a fraction of what is needed to be ready for a hybrid society. Coming back to your previous question on how will ProSocial AI play out at the individual and macro level, I think it will be the kind of AI system that you, if you really think about it, would desire. Like a coach that is challenging you, asking you questions that may be uncomfortable, something that is nudging you in the right moment to do the right thing. Or maybe that's reminding you of who you really are, who you really want to be. Not giving you the answers, not telling you what to do, but prodding you just in the moment you need it. I would argue that's a micro application of ProSocial AI. At the macro level, imagine an AI system connecting the resources that are available and the lacks and the needs that are still there. To really have this kind of social accounting matrix for zero that is constantly monitoring where are gaps, where are scarcities. Now, this does not have to be limited to national boundaries. Imagine that at the meta scale. Something like the UN having a global interactive dashboard. This sounds like science fiction, but from a technological standpoint, it is possible today. The question, and I think that's why it is an exciting time to be alive. It's not so much what is possible, but what do we actually want to make happen?
Can we get people on the same page for the best outcome? We all want potentially, or, there's a lot of wants in different directions happening. At least that's what I'm concerned about. We're coming to the end here, and I wanted to see, we have a couple folks that were able to join live, which, hello everyone. And I want to make sure we have time for their question, but there's this gray area I find myself in terms of AI companionship. You said at the micro level, maybe AI is taking the form of a coach that's really like helping us, nudge us, and push us to like hopefully our best self. What are your thoughts on AI companionship and how that may help or hurt people pursuing human connection and human literacy?
I think AI companionship very nicely illustrates this double-sided phase of AI that we spoke about at the beginning, because on the one hand, it clearly has some benefit for individuals who experience loneliness and who might now have access to an entity to talk to, because it has been found in various studies that the simple fact of communicating and getting some feedback, even if the other entity is not human, has benefit, and that the person experiences an increase in their subjective well-being. So that in and by itself is valuable. But then obviously there is the caveat that this cannot replace genuine interpersonal interaction. I think the plus and the minus need to be mentioned together, because it's easy to consider that AI companionship can fix the loneliness crisis experienced in many countries. If the question for big numbers of people is either companionship with AI or nothing at all, then I would argue AI companionship is better than nothing at all, but is by far not as good as true human companionship, or maybe a combination of both, a hybrid buddy system. I think it is possible to configure AI companionship in a way that is helpful in the way that I mentioned before. I'm currently developing with two other colleagues an app, a compassionate caregiver companion coach, which is configured exactly with that ambition to help individuals to be at their best self in fulfilling their role in the service of others. Mm-hmm. So I think there are ways, but it's coming back to the ambition that underpins the system. The problem is not the tool. The problem is not the AI companion, but it's the way in which it is configured, and it is the objective with which it is used.
Mm. A word that comes to mind is there's the Arabic word called niyat, which is like the intention behind doing something. And I think that is really the crux of it. What is the niyat behind why this was built? And that will inform the effect that it has. So to wrap, if there's any kind of tactical guidance you can offer our community of mothers, of parents, how can we advocate, as you have been, for pro-social AI? What does that look like for a parent in their community?
I think something valuable is to always advocate for double literacy and really benefit from the AI hype to catch up on those more value-oriented lessons missing from the current curriculum. The other aspect is to advocate for awareness that AI is not just another tool. There's this example of the calculator that is brought in, that AI is just like when the calculator came around and it was argued that it would replace all mathematicians and make thinking obsolete. I would argue that generative AI is different because it is something you interact with, and it is learning very fast how you think, how you interact, it influences how we perceive ourselves and others. In that sense, advocating for ProSocial AI starts with advocating for awareness. And I think 4 very practical questions to ask ourselves in that context is the why are you using AI? Who are you without all your tools, all your technology, just as a human being? Where do you stand right now on your journey in terms of AI integration? And where do you see complementarity between your AI and your natural intelligence? What will you never delegate? What is it that you will never delegate to AI? And those 4 questions can be very helpful to keep ourselves on track and not to be washed away by the AI flush. But also it's important to revisit those questions because the answers you're giving today might not be the same as the ones that you will be giving next year. And that's okay. But we need to be aware of our transition on that journey.
Be mindful of how we're evolving alongside the technology. That's amazing. That's very actionable. I'm excited to share those 4 questions with our community. Before we go into this rapid fire, we have a few folks who joined us after the kids are in bed. If you have any questions, please feel free to put it in the chat. We do have somebody who said values in, values out is really refreshing, and I appreciate that as well. People always say garbage in and garbage out in the data and AI space, so that really resonates. But while we're waiting for some questions, Dr. Walther, if you don't mind, I'd like to ask a rapid fire of what's in your tech stack. Are you an Apple or an Android?
Apple.
Interesting.
I'm not an Apple affinity person. I have been experiencing with both.
Maybe I can guess the answer, but I'll still ask Mac or PC.
Mac.
Yeah. Do you have a favorite AI chatbot app, tool?
I like to diversify and to compare them. They are not always performing the same. It depends on the time of the day and the day of the week. They're good for different things.
Do you have a tech book podcast recommendation for our community?
The Substack of Michael Jabbour I find really good. Also, for something more practical, the Substack of Ethan Mollick. I think right now, although I just finished writing a book, I'm not sure if there are any books that encapsulate the really fast evolution for something purely technological. I'm not sure there are any books with the pulse of the time.
Have you read Empire of AI by Karen Howe?
No, I did not.
One interesting connective thread is that her whole thesis is that we are developing artificial intelligence without a true understanding of human intelligence. That's one of the first sentences in her book. And so we have a question. What are the most important lessons to instill in current and future generations to encourage compassionate rather than harmful AI use?
The universal rule. The golden rule is a nice reminder of don't do to others what you don't want to have done to yourself, or maybe even the platinum rule, consider what the other person might want because it might not be the same of what you want. And I think that's the best and maybe the most uncomfortable thing to remember in that context.
The universal rule, yes. And that was in the Gazette article that I really appreciated because it's so simple. And our mothers tell that to us from day one, but somehow it gets lost in the fray of life. And what is the title of your new book?
Artificial Intelligence for Inspired Action. So AI for IA, the technology we need for the humans we want, the world we want.
Oh, that's amazing. Yes, we will be sharing all the resources, her most recent book. We are so grateful to you, Dr. Walther. I'm excited to share this recording for all the ummies who were very excited to attend but couldn't make it this time. Thank you for your thoughtful leadership. I'm grateful for the work that you're doing.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yes, and thank you all for joining us, and we hope you have a wonderful evening.
Bye, everyone. Thank you for joining.